Right, here I am, previews on. And so in my last video update I went through some of these templated terrain zones that I'm making, which work for the Warmachine game or Hordes and just about anything else. And these are cork boards. As you can see, it's about 12 inches across. I had a bit of an issue in that I've got a bit of a flat side on one side because my cork board was a 30 centimetre square, I think, so the result was me having to trim a bit off the edge, although I'm not playing competition grade games, so I'm not too worried that it's slightly uneven. And I used the resin piece in the middle of this one, which is a pond, which I picked up at Salute, and I'm afraid, which is a Wargamers convention in the UK, and I'm afraid I don't know the company that provided it, but it's on there. A couple of toads, tortoise, and these are Games Workshop tiled pieces, terrain bases that they do in a kit form, and I've embedded them in there. If you look at the last video, you can see how that worked out. And these are from Foreground, the MDF terrain maker, and they're sort of tiles that they do. Again, I detail them in the last video. And all I've done since the last session with these is I've used some of this. This was on cheap, and I've seen this selling for around that price before on Amazon as well, but this was from Hobbycraft locally, and it's Liquitex spray paint. And because I just wanted a quick coat, I was going to paint them, and I thought, oh no, I'll just spray them, and it gives everything a dark coat in one hit. So I'll just run through the different bases that I'd sprayed with that stuff. So we have this terrain piece, which is, the majority of it is just natural cork that's cut through the middle there. That's a Games Workshop Mines of Moria, Hobbit or something, plastic piece, injection moulded with the stones and that. There's an old sword from Games Workshop there as well. So this control zone I was going to use as a sort of representing an old battleground, whereas this one is obviously a sort of magic pond or something, and they're all done as sort of as flat as possible so that models can move easily across them rather than having a lot of terrain in the way. Although, as I've mentioned in the last video, they could be used as rough ground as well, so you could throw them down and you've got a bit of rough ground to use if you weren't using it as a control zone. This one I've done my next layer of paint testing on the side there just to make sure I wasn't suffering any strange paint issues, because I used Tamiya Flat Earth as my natural sandy earthy colour, which I'm going to use across all of this bit, which is the sand texture. This will get a rocky, usual black and grey rocky coloration. These sort of rocks may also be coloured up in that colour, but the majority of it's going to be Tamiya Flat Earth. And because you thin Tamiya Flat Earth with its own thinner, which is kind of alcohol based, even though it's an acrylic paint, I just wanted to check that wasn't going to melt any of this Liquitex spray paint that I'd used here by using that alcohol kind of thinner. I thought, oh my god, I better do a test zone, because otherwise I could end up stripping it off or something, which hasn't happened. It's gone on okay, and I painted it on last night just as a test in the corner. That will actually get a dry brush up as well from there, so that'll have a lighter sand, and when it's on it'll look a little bit more even and be an interesting contrast with the darker stony areas. I'll probably do these as wood, sort of dark earth wood, these sort of large planky pieces. And the reason I put them on there like that was because I had another control zone section, which is this rectangular one, and I used a lot of those sort of worn out wood bits and pieces on there to make it look like maybe this is going to be a boggy zone. The objective for this one is that obviously the same flat earth colour around the edge, but I'll keep it darker in the middle there, and I'm going to put that kind of scenic water effect in there to make it look boggy, and then stretch that out onto here as well. It's not going to be really deep, it will just be a very thin layer of shiny liquid water effect that stretches out here into this area, and possibly along the sort of groove up there as well. And the idea being that this is like an old boggy area that they've put down wood, but that's slowly sunk in as well on this old trail. And could be, even though it's abstracted in the game, you could say this is a control zone because it represents an easy path through through this boggy zone. And that was also the idea for these control zones. Is I thought, try and have a reason for them to be there. This one being an old battleground that maybe has some significance and has a key control point that whether you're using it for Warmachine or Song of Blades or Heroes or anything, is a significant location. This one again, kind of a water source or maybe a magic pond, whatever you want to call it. And if again you look at the old, the last video that I did, I used a polyfiller called a do-it-yourself filling material that was ready-made, and I used that to build up these areas with the cork in there as well. So you can see bits of the cork here still exposed, but because I sanded down after I put the polyfiller on, the whole thing looks a little bit more integrated, so it looks like you get the jagged edge of the cork but then a smoother area as well. And I quite like doing that kind of level of detail because I suppose it looks a bit more natural, or at least staged and even. So rather than if I just went for the cork piece on there, I just have a big jagged thing all the way around. It gives it a nice exposed edge plus a more natural side as well. Whether that looks good will be as a result of the final thing. And I have one last one here, which is again, I've used the Games Workshop terrain tile pieces, plastic ones in there, glued them down and then surrounded them with polyfiller even around the edges there, so it sort of looks like they are old ruined tiles in there. Plus then there's a broken out section here with the gravel and what have you to sort of make it look like the part of the old tombs crumbling away, even though as a tomb piece, and this is a Games Workshop plastic one, it's quite a perfect tomb, isn't it? There's no chips or chisels out of it, but I'm happy with the way that is. And also one thing I'm probably going to do now I've sprayed and I look at the whole thing integrated, obviously the spray has a little bit of a sheen which will go when it's all dull coated, but some of the areas of the sand that I glued on and then used the scenic glue I left exposed, mostly really just out of the fact that I was doing one area at a time. So I was doing that area with the glue, putting the sand on and then moving on to the next, and as I did that I sort of naturally sometimes left a bit aside. And that I might do with underneath showing the darker stone through, as if it's an area where the sort of sandy, earthy texture hasn't gone on. And of course this won't just be dry brush green or something, it's going to be a sandy colour, and then static grass will form quite a lot of the areas on there. And when I do the static grass, plus some extra taller tufts to make it look natural, I can disguise areas that maybe haven't quite worked out as well as they could. So for example the back of this piece, it's got kind of a wooden bit, but I could put some static grass or a tuft in there. It disguises any issues with there being a gap and keeps it all integrated. And if I put it to its side again, you can see it's really quite flat, but there is some raised areas through there, and obviously this had a raised lip around the edge which I've completely disguised with the polyfiller and stuff. So that's them. It's a hot night here. It's the 22nd of June, which is the day after summer solstice in the UK. So yesterday was our longest day, and now we're heading downhill into winter, but still in midsummer at the moment and rather hot. So yeah, I had thought, what I was going to do in this video was start the painting. So I'll show you what I was going to use. I was going to use the Tamiya flat earth, which you thin down with the Tamiya thinners, put them in a pot. Thin them down, and it means I get quite good coverage out of this small pot. But I tend to buy these quite often because it's my flat earth is my sort of main primary base colour of choice after I've done the sort of priming level. And that's it. So I'll paint that on as the next step. And so just while I was here, I was doing other sort of control zones for games here, which I've based on medium bases, resin ones. And these have just had a grey spray primer on them. And I've used bits and pieces on here. So this is from tabletopterrain.de, a German company. It's like a chaos style banner, and I had some of these octopus tentacle things already in metal from Weird Miniatures. They use them as their basing supplies, and it kind of tied in with the this flag from Tabletop DE as well, and you can see it has the sort of tentacles coming over there. So another sort of control point, and this is a sort of resin stone base, plus in addition to the resin base itself. This was a stone cross. I bought that at Salute, and again used a resin base and just planted it on there as an interesting control point. I might do a sort of glow, green glow or something from inside there, or just leave it a neutral stone colour. And I have a third one, which is using some old Games Workshop pieces. So kind of a gremlin with a book thing. Obviously the primer's not gone everywhere on there. Another resin base with like a column on it. But on the flat surface of it, I've put this old book, which I think was from one of the Games Workshops. I can't remember what it was called, but it's like a tabletop adventure fantasy simple game, and this was a metal book that they had. So I've also put some little pumpkin-y skulls on there as well to have it as a sort of control or spawning point in a game as well. So those are three other things that are on the workbench to get completed in addition to these. So hopefully when it's cooled down a bit here, because I haven't got air conditioning over here, I'll get that paint on, and then I'll show that in a video as well. So this is just like an interim update to show that they've had their primer put on, and thoughts about the next step, which would be using a very big brush to get the flat earth on, dry brush that up probably with a sandy colour, and then also obviously feature out all the other stones, ponds and everything else that I've got on those to do. But you know, this one is actually one of my favourite pieces in that the sort of cracked earth style of the exposed cork. This is natural cork, which you can buy on eBay and then just tear up and cut into chunks. When you build up around it and put some little gravelly bits and things, it does integrates nicely. If you just dumped it on there and glued it on without the sort of transition layers, it would stand out a bit much. But as it is, that's going to look. I think it's going to look quite nice as a stony outcrop with the normal terrain going up to it. And then when there's tufts and things, it will integrate it even more. So that's it. That's my night tonight. I'm on air. Hopefully it's recorded, and I'm going to sign off now. So here we go. Good night.